lifelong friends, 6 trusty balls, and endless NFL talks. Welcome to 3 Guys, 6 Balls NFL Podcast. Welcome to episode 11 of 3 Guys, 6 Balls NFL Podcast. Today, we are completing our cycle of AFC West guests on the show. We started off with Tim from Answer the Call, that's COLL, who is a Chargers fan. Then we had our friend Lincoln, who is a Chiefs fan, on the show. And then last week, due to Avery's fire that didn't apparently burn down his house, we had Corey from Shovik Sports on the show, who is a Broncos fan. And today, we have Cody, who is the co-host of Drew Code Sports Talk on the show, who is a Raiders fan. So we're completing the AFC West cycle today. Cody, thanks for coming on. Why don't you get us started just by introducing yourself? Let us know a little bit about yourself, your podcast, and how you became a Raiders fan.
Sure. So I'm Cody. I'm one half of Drew Code Sports Talk. My best friend, Drew, who is the front of the name, he is the one that had the brainchild of having a podcast, and I've been the guy that's kind of been running it behind the scenes because now that he's super busy with his career and he actually coaches high school sports, so I have been doing it all behind the scenes and hoping that it's his favorite podcast is kind of like my favorite slogan, but I've been a Raiders fan as long as I can remember. I mean, I remember having Jeff George as our quarterback. I remember the year where we went to the Super Bowl and lost and having my heart broken there. And then the 20 years of obscurity as where we are today. And, I'm just excited that you guys invited me on. And hopefully I put on a good show for you guys. And I'm looking forward to talking ball with y'all.
Sweet. Hey, at least you can remember a Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, bud.
Yeah. Will and I are both Cowboys fans, and the last time they won was when we were, 2?
95?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the fortunes will turn around real soon, but
not this year.
I've been saying that since as a Raider fan, hopefully we'll get back there. And at least the Cowboys have gotten close, in the playoffs. And at least my Raiders have only gotten the playoffs 2 years in that 25-year span. So at least you guys have been knocking on the door in the NFC and been relevant. The Raiders have barely had success and are still figuring it out. So, I would say you guys have a closer shot than we do.
We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Appreciate the optimism.
I'm sorry, guys. I tried.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. All right, well, today, since Cody is on the show and he's a Raiders fan, we're going to be talking a lot about the Raiders. But first, before we do that, we're going to get into a little activity that we want to do. We're going to talk about some playoff teams from last year. So what we're going to do is talk about the playoff teams from both the AFC and the NFC. And Avery's going to do the AFC, Will's going to do the NFC, and then Cody is going to do the AFC and NFC. And they're each going to pick one team from each conference that made the playoffs that won't make it this season, and then they're going to pick a non-playoff team from last year that will make it this season to replace the team that they're taking out. So, Cody, since you are our guest, why don't you get us started, and we'll leave it up to you if you pick the AFC or NFC to start.
Let's go with dramatic flair. Let's go with the NFC. So for me in the NFC, do you want me to pick a non-playoff team going to be a playoff or a playoff team going non-playoff?
Give us your playoff team from last year that's not going to make it, and then give us your replacement.
Got it. All right. So in the NFC, a playoff team that I was looking at that I don't think is going to duplicate success into this upcoming year, for me, is going to be the Minnesota Vikings. And starting off at 14-3, of course, J.J. McCarthy is essentially going in as a rookie quarterback, and Sam Darnold's success, to me, is completely on their head coach. And him going to Seattle, I don't know if that was the best move for him. I feel like he should have stayed in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, but that's another discussion for another day. But ultimately, I think Minnesota, my co-host would normally say, once there's film on you, teams will figure you out. And I feel like with J.J. McCarthy, even though he's coming in as somewhat of a rookie, I think NFL defenses will really put a real stronghold on him. I don't know how much of that offense he's really going to have a command over. And that defense, I mean, I know that they've added a couple of pieces on the defensive side. Will they duplicate the same success in this upcoming year? I'm not 100% sure. So an NFC team for me that I don't know will get back into the playoffs, definitely the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I think you have a good point there. One thing I jotted down with the Vikings is last year, their offense was 19th in rushing yards. They were 6th in passing yards. But now with J.J. McCarthy, if your offense isn't good at running, you're going to have to rely on your passing again. And I don't know if J.J. McCarthy is ready for that.
Right.
Well, and they don't even have an additional option, right? Your backup Sam Howell, and behind that you have Brett Rippon. So if J.J. McCarthy doesn't work out, you're scrambling for best available. And so you are really putting yourself out there, and you're putting a lot of eggs in the broken knee J.J. McCarthy basket and just hoping. And when they drafted him, I talked to multiple Vikings fans, which for some reason there's a lot here in Oregon, and they all said, oh, yeah, I'm so glad we have a handoff specialist. I'm so glad we have a guy who can just hand the ball off and move on. Good thing we have good running backs to go with it. And so there was a general unexcitement behind it, and it's just not – I don't think it's going to go well for them. That team's really good. They've got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson. They've got Aaron Jones. I mean, they have a good offense. They just have an unproven, unshown quarterback, and we've seen time and time again that when your quarterback sucks, your team sucks. Doesn't matter how good you are. So – I'm not a fan of this Vikings team this year. I don't know what their over-under is on wins, but it's the under for me.
Whatever it is, it's the under. Yeah, I feel like the Vikings is probably the choice for most people who would be doing this. I haven't really heard a lot of optimism when it comes to the Vikings, so I would tend to agree with you, Cody. Give us your non-playoff team from last year who is going to replace the Vikings.
I feel like this one's a little tougher. I feel like the NFC kind of is playing itself out, and the low-hanging fruit could have been the San Francisco 49ers, which maybe, but if I'm being honest, I don't know if San Francisco has done enough on their team to really fill their offensive needs or their defensive needs, and obviously they just finished paying Brock Purdy, so who knows what kind of a starter he's going to be with the weapons that they have. They've obviously got some expensive contracts, and if they don't really have a team that's going to go out in the field, and I don't know if they're going to be an NFC favorite, but that's low-hanging fruit. To me, though, the far stretch that I will say is I think the Atlanta Falcons are a team that a lot of people would assume are maybe in the realm of they're kind of okay with Michael Penix Jr., and I think they're a team in a weak division that actually might surprise some people. And in perspective, Tampa only won the division with 10 games, and Atlanta had 8 wins. And I do feel like that if they have Michael Penix now with a full offseason, coming in there healthy with some of the offensive pieces, and I think with Raheem Morris and that defense, I feel like it's improved enough to where they can at least fight to either win the division or at least get into one of the 3 wild cards. So to me, a sleeper team in the NFC to get in the playoffs that wasn't before, in my opinion, would be the Atlanta Falcons.
I would say if they're going to make it, I think they're going to make it as a wild card. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to make it as the division winner because I still see the Bucs winning that division. But the trend is in 2022, they won it with 8 wins. 23, they won it with 9 wins. Last year, they won it with 10 wins. Mm-hmm. So maybe this year they'll win it with 11 wins.
We'll see. We're on the way up, as the draft would show.
The Falcons beat the Bucs twice last year. They beat them twice. They beat them at home and in Tampa Bay. That's where they play. And the only reason that the Bucs made the playoffs over the Falcons is because the Falcons had 2 overtime losses to end the season. If you remember, that's when Michael Penix came in and took over as a rookie. So he went 1-3 in his starts. They beat the Giants, but everybody beat the Giants last year. And then they lost in overtime to the Commanders, 30-24. And then they lost to the Panthers. Everybody beat the Panthers, except for the Falcons here. They lost in overtime, 44-38. And so I think you're exactly right, Cody. With an offseason under their belt with Michael Penix, if they want him to be the guy, with a full offseason under their belt, he's the guy. And if not, you still have somehow on your team Kirk Cousins. You may not like him. You may not want him to be the guy. But guess what? He did pretty good for you last year. He can take you, dare I say, higher. I actually have both of the things you said were my 1A and 1B on my list here, so I'm glad somebody said it. I actually have the Falcons winning the South. I know you said they're not going to, Joe, but I actually have them beating the Bucs out in the South this year. The Falcons have the 4th easiest schedule coming into the year. Now, I put next to 0 stock in strength of schedule in the offseason. It is absolute garbage. The 49ers have the easiest schedule, and if you look at the chart, it is significantly easier, apparently. Mm-hmm. But it can be as easy as you want if you can't execute. That's all that matters. So the Falcons have the 4th easiest strength of schedule, and with that, I think they're going to ride it all the way to the South win.
I agree with Will. I think they're making it in. Tampa to me was just like, oh yeah, we have to include at least one team from this division. I know they won 10-7. But it's one of those where it's like, thank goodness this isn't soccer. You know, that whole division would be relegated down to, college, um, where they would stomp,
Not lying,
unironically. But yeah, I think the Falcons are in the best position. Also, personally, I think the Panthers are going to do marginally better this season. I'm not even going to say significantly, but I think it's kind of to me, that division for the past couple years has always just seemed like a dogfight, where it's just like, okay, you guys are all trash and you're all trash together. So like, let's find out who's going to make it out of this and then maybe win a game, in the playoffs. But I think the Falcons are probably in the best position to do that.
I just think Baker Mayfield and Emeka Egbuka are going to light it up this season.
And McMillan, who's on that team, he showed a lot of resilience in that offense as well, with Godwin being out and obviously opposite of Mike Evans. So we'll see. But, I think the Panthers, to Avery's point, I think might surprise some people. It just depends on the kind of Bryce Young the season will start with. Is it going to be the first half of the season, or is it going to be the last half of the season? Because if it's Bryce Young who finished the season, Panthers might be a wild card team too, just because of the weapons and all that around them. But, I think what is interesting about this division is all those teams should be competitive enough to win the division, but yet their teams just for some reason can't compete with the upper echelon. So it's kind of like, almost a losing record will get you in as long as you just are the number one in the worst division, which arguments could be made that it's the NFC South. So
I agree. And the one thing the Falcons did this year in the draft is in the first round, they drafted two stout defensive players to come in and to fill some holes that they had. And so I love the pick.
One thing I will say with the Falcons' 2 first-round draft picks, I didn't love that trade because they gave up a first-rounder next year. I didn't love the trade, but I do like the players they got. So hopefully it works out for them, because they're going to need it to work out, because they did give up a first-round pick. So that's what I'll say about that.
I'm surprised that you found that trade shocking, because it's the same team that signed Kirk Cousins to a deal guaranteed and then drafted his then predecessor within the first 10 picks of the previous draft. So, I mean, it's kind of par for the course.
That's true. You have a good point. Yeah, you have a good point. I didn't think about that. But, yeah, they're going to need that trade to work out.
The Vikings will get desperate enough when J.J. McCarthy doesn't work out. The Vikings will trade a first rounder for Kirk Cousins.
I think the Steelers are still in the market for a quarterback, so maybe.
You watch your Will Howard have an ass, all right?
They're not going to ride with Rudy?
Who?
Oh, that joke.
Steelers. They're not going to ride with Rudy?
Rudy who?
He's lucky to be on the team, to be honest.
Sorry, I always call him Rudy because my father-in-law is a Steelers fan, and he always calls him Rudy.
How funny.
So
Mason
Rudolph.
Yeah,
I just now got that. Okay.
He went to Notre Dame back in like the 50s or 60s, whenever it was. He's still playing.
Come on, Will.
Still doing it.
That was the only Rudy I could think of.
All right, well, since we're on the NFC teams, Will, give us your playoff team from last year that's not going to make the playoffs this year.
Sure, I kind of already talked about it, touched on it a little bit. I don't think the Buccaneers are going to make it at all this year. I don't even think they're going to sneak into a wild card team or wild card slot.
Wow.
I think we're going to see similar performances from 2 teams in NFC East. I think we're going to see similar performances from 2 teams in the North. I don't think the third wild card spot's going to go to the South, right? We just talked about how bad the South is. Now, it is the most gettable division, but I don't think that we see 2 teams from the NFC South. So I think that the Buccaneers are first team out. Looking at this from last year, Packers have a team that looks like they can make it again. Commanders look like they can make it again. Vikings, we talked about probably not making it again because the structure. And so you fill one slot there, but the Niners have a wild card chance team. I don't think the Buccaneers make it at all next year, actually. Not just make it out of the South, but make it at all. Which is too bad, because as we just talked about, that team is good. They have a good team, but when you're comparing it against the NFC South, good is relative. Coming into this season, I think a team that didn't make it last year, that has a high probability, in my opinion, of making it this year, is the Arizona Cardinals. I like what they're doing. I like what they got going on. I'm not a huge Kyler Murray fan, but I don't have to be. He seems to be doing good enough. I think the NFC West is also very gettable. The Niners are in a do it right now or it's never going to happen scenario with just signing Brock Purdy. They just re-signed Fred Warner. They've got to sign these guys to big contracts. So it's either a right now or it's never going to happen. And they were not close last year. They were not closer. And with the pieces they lost, I'm actually on our own podcast, I've said that they've lost the will to live out there. They lost half that damn team, and they didn't get better in the offseason. And now they're paying all sorts of money, so much guaranteed, no trade clause. You are going full-on marriage with Brock Purdy with no way out, at least no easy financial way out. And so you're really handicapping your team there. So I think the Arizona Cardinals have a chance to slip in. Over the offseason, they've added so many pieces. We talked about them as a draft winner, I believe. I think they're just a full-on off-season winner. They've signed Josh Sweat. They've signed Calais Campbell. They've signed Dalvin Tomlinson. They drafted Will Johnson in the second round. Their entire starting offense is remaining the same. The core 11 guys did not change from year to year. And so they're coming in with the same coach, same quarterback, same receivers, same offensive line. Everybody's healthy, hopefully. That's always the hope. We know as we're pushing through the offseason, anything can happen. And all they did during the offseason was bolster their defense hugely. And so I think they're going to – I don't think they're just going to sneak into the playoffs. I think they win the West. Now, I've called two different NFC winners here, so sorry. But I think the Cardinals end up winning the West. I don't think the Rams do it. I don't think the Niners do it. The Seahawks, I don't think they're closer than they were last year, losing Geno and, that team. So I think the Cardinals.
Yeah, I really like what the Cardinals are doing. On offense last year, they ranked 11th in total yards, and they were 12th in points. So they were just outside the top 10. And then their defense was 15th in points allowed, but they used 6 of their 7 draft picks on defensive players. So I think they had that big focus. And again, Will, like you said, they got Josh Sweat. So they had a big defensive focus, which I think is going to help them going into the season. And speaking of the Rams, they had a net points of negative 19 last year. So they allowed 19 more points than they scored. And so eventually, if you do that, that's not a pattern for success right there. So I think the Rams could potentially be out. I know you didn't say them specifically, Will, but I think the Rams could be out of the playoffs this year.
Is that not what I said?
He told me that earlier.
No, I said the Buccaneers. That's right. I said the Buccaneers. Yeah. The Rams are my other team is not going to make the playoffs. But yeah, I agree with that. The Rams are not in a winning position. They're losing key pieces and everybody's getting older and it's just not what is their coach's name?
Sean McVay.
Thank you, Sean McVay. The Sean McVay experience is coming to an end out there. I just don't think it's going to last a whole lot longer.
But if he could turn that around with the trajectory going down, because most of the time you just look at a coach, if they win a lot of games one season, it's like, oh, this guy's top snot. But if you can turn it around while it's sinking, that's impressive.
That's huge.
That might be more of a GM thing than a coach thing.
Well, that's what every business wants, is that as the business is sinking, you hire the right guy to turn the whole thing around, or the guys you already have turn it around so you don't have to make new hires.
If you can do it without rehiring, like cleaning house, starting over, that's a culture statement.
Absolutely.
If you can do that, rather than just, hey, win or you all lose your jobs. If you can have a team in there that is kept it going, that's impressive.
That's huge.
Plus, it's LA. That'd be an awesome free agent destination if you could do that.
Well, one of those two has to be.
And it's not going to be the Chargers. Sorry, Tim.
I love the shade. I'm actually surprised that most of you guys are saying that the Rams aren't going to make it. I actually think that they are in a position where again, they did add Devontae Adams. They have Puka Nacua that's coming in. They've got a young offensive line that's only going to get better. That was injured majority of last season. Their defense was almost able to keep up with the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs. I feel like with this extra season that they have improved a little bit. So I'm actually curious. I'm actually a lot higher on the Rams, I guess. I mean, I think the NFC West is not going to be this big arms race of 11 to 12 wins. I think it's going to be relatively 10 wins will probably win the division because, again, they're all kind of in this middle of the pack of between a rebuild and pushing for a playoff spot, but no one's really going the extra step to be a legit threat in the NFC, so to speak. But I think the Rams still would win the division, but the Cardinals, what I'm concerned with would be Kyler Murray. He's a good quarterback in terms of like stats, but I don't know if he's the guy that really puts the team on his back and turns it around as a winner. I think that's what I'm concerned with is, for where he was drafted number 1 overall, it still feels like we're waiting for Kyler Murray to turn into, the guy that was supposed to save this franchise. And granted, he dealt with some injuries, I think, in his 3rd season. So, giving a little grace in that. But at the same time, I feel like Kyler Murray is just kind of like in a prove-it year, and I just don't know if the Cardinals are in position. But we'll see. With Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray, maybe they get on the same page because clearly it didn't look like they were last season. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I said it last week. When your quarterback can't see you, you're going to look a little bit inconsistent.
Yeah.
So hopefully Kyler Murray grew a couple inches, probably not, but hopefully.
I actually don't think the Rams get better as a team trading Cooper Kupp. Not physically trading, not business trading, but like swapping out Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams.
Sure.
I don't think that's a better team fit. And as a Raiders fan, you saw Devontae on the Raiders, Devontae on the Jets, Devontae on the Packers. I don't think Devontae has turned into, as later in his career we go on, he hasn't turned into a team guy. He hasn't turned into a locker room guy. He's not the personality you're looking to as a, hey, we're going to rally the troops around that guy. Now, they have that already in Matt Stafford. He is that guy for the Rams specifically. But they lost their second piece in Cooper Kupp, and I just don't think they get better overall with him being gone.
Yeah, I get it. I think with what was left in terms of wide receivers, and I really think that Sean McVay bringing in Devontae Adams was because it fits his offensive scheme. He really wants a guy that can go in the slot and just, carve up a DB there and just have a plethora of routes that he can choose from. And obviously, Devontae Adams is one of the best that's ever gone on the football field to do it. And I do agree with you in some respect. Devontae Adams isn't necessarily the guy that's going to come in and, okay, I will take over the team. I'm the locker room guy. He's definitely going out for either the fact that he can stay in California because that's where he's from, or, in some respects, maybe he's ring chasing, but I would even argue the Rams were probably the 3rd best team that he could have signed with. He could have gone to Buffalo. He could have gone to Baltimore, which probably would have been more poised to be Super Bowl ready with him on the team than the Rams. I think the Rams just more or less, it's a system fit, and also he gets to stay in California. Sean McVay still can, in my opinion, he's a really good coach to where he's going to get the best out of you offensively. And Matthew Stafford arguably is the 2nd best or maybe even the best quarterback that Devontae will have playing with outside of Aaron Rodgers. And I think it's going to prolong both of their careers, at least for a season or two. But I do think that they'll remain relatively competitive with Sean McVay's offense and Kyren Williams, of course, who's been a beast in their running back room. So I really feel like the Rams offensively are going to surprise people. They're not going to look as old as people realize.
I think they need to get out to a faster start. I feel like the last couple of years they've gotten off to a slow start, and then they've kind of had to fight that last part of the season to make the playoffs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I feel like that makes you like more ready for the playoffs. But I just feel like they need to get off to a faster start this year.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Kyren Williams, they've also got Blake Corum back there. Those guys are great so long as they stay healthy, and we've seen it already. The Rams, when they can't run the ball, they're not good. And so they need to run the ball. Matt Stafford, in his whole career, has needed to hand the ball off to create get everybody creeping forward that way. He can throw it over the top. He and Dak Prescott are very similar in that way. You have got to have a good running game to support this style of quarterback. And I just don't see it being consistent this year for him.
All right. Well, with that, let's get on to the AFC. So we'll start with Avery on this one. Give us your playoff team from last year who is not going to make it this year.
I have my 2 teams, but I want to put an honorable mention out to the AFC West, which I know we'll talk about. I think that is going to be a fun division to watch. I think having 3 teams in, I would love to know, this might be something Joel could find for next week, but what are the odds that a division with 3 teams that make the playoffs with 3 teams again the next year?
I don't know that. I don't know that, but I do know that there's never been 4 teams from a division in.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Having said that, I think there could be some shaky ground there, but the 2 teams I'm looking at that will just swap is the Steelers and the Bengals. I think the Steelers are out, mainly because I need to double down on my prediction that Will Howard is garbage. I don't remember what exactly how I qualified that, like if he's going to lose or be out of the NFL or just not win Rookie of the Year, something like that. I think he's going to lose. I think Mike Tomlin's finally going to get his first losing record and not make the playoffs. And I think from everything I've seen, I think the Bengals just had a down year last year. I know that there's been some other stuff in there, but I think they overtake them, and I think they look a lot better this next year. Not just make the playoffs, but I think the Bengals just play a lot better, and I think the Steelers end up just kind of crashing and burning. I know Joel's a Steelers fan now, and I pity him, and I offer support as much as I can.
They're secondary.
Yeah, but Dallas isn't much better, pal. Come on.
Yeah. He loves his wife, and I understand. But
can we just put the Steelers defense on Dallas? Then we'll be set.
Oh, that won't help, honestly.
Just move the Steelers defense over to Dallas. We'll make the playoffs.
I do want to say that on one hand, I would like to see Aaron Rodgers go to the Steelers, but also I want to see Will Howard go out there and get Mason Rudolphed by Myles Garrett. That's what I want to see. I want to see him get thrown around. And part of it might be a little bit for revenge for Oregon, but I think I've got a bet on the line for Will Howard. So anyways, I think they're out. I think the Bengals are in, and I would love to know what y'all think about that.
Say what you will about the Bengals defense, but there was 15 teams that had a positive turnover differential last year, and only 2 of those 15 teams did not make the playoffs. One of those teams was the Bengals. So despite how bad everybody says their defense was, they created enough turnovers that they had a positive turnover differential. So I think their new defensive coordinator, who I think is Al Golden, is that right? Yes, Al Golden. He was Notre Dame's defensive coordinator last year. They hired him. Notre Dame was 11th in total yards allowed. They were 4th in points per game allowed with only 15.5 allowed, and they were 4th best against the pass, which is where the Bengals were not very good. So hopefully Al Golden can come in, and I know he's going from college to the pros, so there is a difference there, but this is a proven defensive coordinator at the college level who's had success, specifically in the secondary, and I think he can really help the Bengals to get better. And that stat, that turnover differential, was just something that jumped out to me when I was kind of looking at the Bengals, because I actually had them as one of my teams that would be in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, so I agree with Avery about the Steelers. I don't think they're making the playoffs again. Their roster is arguably the worst that Mike Tomlin's ever had to deal with. And not to say that getting rid of George Pickens was a bad idea, because I agree. Like, if he's going to be someone that's going to be a cancer to your locker room, best thing to do is just find a team that are willing to take him. My condolences to the Cowboys for accepting the trade. But I do think that the Steelers, and unfortunately Mike Tomlin's record of having winning seasons, is probably going to come to an end this year, just because of the schedule that they're going to have, the team that's going out there, regardless if it's Will Howard or Mason Rudolph. There's no legit quarterback that is going to win them games or really keep them into it. And even though you have DK Metcalf, that's not nearly enough to compete. And sure, they have Calvin Austin III, and I think they have Van Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken. But those are all maybe okay wide receivers, but they're not nearly enough to put together an offensive juggernaut. And that offensive line it's okay. It's not great. And if you don't have a quarterback that can throw the ball down the field, then drafting Caleb Johnson out of Iowa kind of is a waste of a pick, because now you can just turn this Pittsburgh Steelers team one-dimensional. And sure, you can rely on this defense to save you, but they can't do it week after week. There's just not enough that they have to withstand that. And this offense needs to get better. So the Steelers are my pick. And I'm not going to say the Bengals, because I don't know if their defense is improved enough. Even with a new coordinator, they lost some of these games with a lead to teams that they should have beaten because their offense scored more points. I don't know if the Bengals can duplicate that, and I don't know how much better that defense is, but I don't know if it's enough to win the division. But but ultimately, though, I agree with Avery, though, the Steelers aren't making the playoffs again.
All right, Cody, so you gave us your team that's out. Who's your team that's going to be in?
All right, guys. So, of course, AFC, we're going to lead right into it. It's my Las Vegas Raiders. We had the best draft. We've had a really good free agency signing, having Geno Smith. We are obviously adding Genty, like I mentioned in the draft, Pete Carroll. We're poised to make the playoffs. It's only 10 wins. Granted, we only had 4 last season, so we need to double and a half that. Let's not get bogged down in the numbers, though. I think the Raiders, though, in a competitive division, and I think with how the schedule is, I really, and this is genuine, and we'll talk more about this later on in the show, but I genuinely feel like that this team is in a position where they'll actually be able to compete and have some of these games go back and forth within the division to where they can maybe take at least half the wins and go 3-3 in the division, a couple of games here and a couple of games there where they need to just take care of business and hold a lead and rely on our defense to bend and don't break. And I do find encouragement with what the Raiders have done to where I will put them in the ring and put this in the spreadsheet. Joel, I guess you guys have one run in here where I'll predict that the AFC, the Raiders will make the wild card. I don't think they're winning the division. I'm not going to say that much, but I think that they will be a team that gets in the playoffs.
That's still a big prediction. If he
It's
wins,
a very
that,
big one.
That's a big one.
Trust me, I'm not trying to sell you guys snake oil, or maybe I am, but I do feel.
And he's not even biased.
No.
I like it.
When the countdown was going on before the recording started, that is what I meant when I said to Avery, I have changed my entire tune in the Raiders just in the time it took us to say hello before we hit record. I told Avery, I hope Cody comes in and says the Raiders are going to make the playoffs. And it's just not going to be. There's no way. And the time it took for me to say that to Avery, we hit record, it was Raiders are making the playoffs for sure. They have changed quite literally everything about that team from last year. Everything is different. New coach, new coaching staff, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, quarterback. I mean, you can just run down the entire list. It's a new person, new quarterback, new running back, new nearly everything. And Pete Carroll, like him or not, he'll be chewing gum on the sideline, guaranteed. And he's proven to be a winner. He has a Super Bowl victory, should have 2. We don't need to talk about that. Growing up in Oregon, we knew a lot of Seahawks fans and had to see Pete Carroll's dumb face, not that he is dumb, I just don't like seeing it, on the TV regularly. And watching him win game after game, and I developed a burning hatred for Pete Carroll and for the Seahawks, just because of all the fanboys around here. And so it really has nothing to do with the Seahawks, kind of. But I just think that this team has taken so many steps in the correct direction from last year. And I don't even know if they were necessarily that bad last year, or they just didn't have the right people in the right spot. They didn't have a quarterback last year. That's where you start. And Gino's proven to be a winner. The team is, I don't think it's just one step ahead. I think it's 2 steps ahead, if not more, than they were last year. I am a fan of this Raiders team this year.
The only mistake they made was not drafting Amarian Hampton over Ashton Genty, right, Cody? I'm just giving you a hard time.
I'm
just giving you a hard time.
I appreciate it. You must have saw that clip because I almost fell out of my chair when that happened. And then what was more frustrating, so behind the scenes, I helped edit one of the reels and I sent it to Tim. But when I was editing it, it made me like, let me look up some stats and see like if I was even right or wrong. And I got more upset because like the stats even say it's not even close. It's Genty over Hampton by a mile. And then I was more fired up. I was like, oh, Tim, get over here. We got to talk about this, man. But
yeah, I saw that. That was a crazy take. Overall, all around better running back is Hampton. He's better at pass pro. He's better at this. Better. That is wild take, pal.
No one's a bigger fan. No one's a bigger fan of Hampton than I am, and I have to say, that's Genty's better. Like that's insane. Any other running back, I'll fight you, but like Genty, I'm like, I would say like, well, Genty's playing in the Mountain West, and I'm like, Hampton's playing in the ACC, like Florida State.
Yeah, and then when I was looking up the stats, Genty almost had 1,000 more rushing yards only rushing yards than Hampton. And I'm not saying Hampton's not a really good player, and I even said like I think Hampton's going to be phenomenal for the Chargers. Really good offensive piece, but Genty's just on another level. And even statistically, like I know college sometimes can be inflated, but I mean, it's not like you just luck up and get 2,600 yards just strictly rushing and 30 touchdowns. Like you don't just get lucky by weak defenses. No, that's some really good talent right there. That's going to translate in the NFL, and a lot of people are saying the same thing. So that's why it was kind of like, what, Hampton over Genty? Wait a second. So
Yeah, especially since, I mean, you play Boise State, you know exactly what they're doing. You know exactly who you have to stop.
And you
And
can't.
if it's a running back, it's like, dude, if it's just the running back, dude, and he's still putting these numbers up on you.
Yeah.
I mean, Oregon, he put up like 250 yards and like 2 or 3 touchdowns.
And in Heisman consideration. So, and no offense
Yep.
to Marion Hampton, he wasn't. So
That's true. I'm really glad they didn't put a Carolina player on the Heisman list. That would have
that'd have been some anarchy.
yeah.
Going back to the Raiders here, to be the best or to beat the best, we always say, right? Last year, looking at that, and pardon me, Cody, but abysmal Raiders team. I don't even know what else to call it.
Yeah, fair.
You guys lost to the Chiefs 2 times, so sorry to bring up bad memories. But let me put a good spin on it. You lost by a total of 9 points over those 2 games. 9 total points. You lost by 2 and you lost by 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the team that's supposed to be the all-world beaters, but, well, should have won the Super Bowl and got housed. But this all-world team that's been, dynasty, Taylor Swift, she's going to win the whole game for us. She's great. You not barely, the loss is a loss. But over 2 games, you lost by a total of 9 points. That, to me, with the right team in the right spot, that's 2 wins. And we had Lincoln on here 2 weeks ago now, and he said that, well, the Chiefs don't care about the regular season. They only care about the playoffs. But the problem with that is you have to win in the regular season to make the playoffs. And he also said that the first round bye matters because it's a free playoff win. Well, the way the Chiefs are trending, their 1 win or single possession game wins, their luck's going to start running out here soon. And as the rest of the league gets better and to build teams to stop the one team, I think the Raiders are making some real good strides.
I hate to bring this up, but if there was any game against the Chiefs that was rigged, I would have to say it was the Raiders game. I think it was the second time where I forget who the quarterback was, but the Raiders were either winning or they were about to win. They were driving down the field and about to win. The quarterback looks over and the center snaps the ball, just happens to snap the ball when the quarterback is looking this way. And then the Chiefs recover the fumble. Like, if there was any game that was rigged, it had to be that one.
Well,
There's no way that just happened by chance.
That's definitely the propaganda from the center. He's like, it's rigged, man. That wasn't me. It was the rigging.
I think that was with Desmond Ridder, if I'm not mistaken, as the QB. But if anything, that's okay. Aiden O'Connell. If anything, that's a perfect illustration of the 2 different teams where one team, the Chiefs, well coached, and again, I heard everyone saying the refs bail them out, and in some respects, sure, calls favored them. I think it's the NFL. Do they tip the balance a little bit? I would imagine so. I mean, they're trying to make a product on the field that's good and attractive to other people, because nothing better than love is hate for another team. But at the same time, you look at the Raiders, we had a first-time head coach in Antonio Pierce that, was literally week to week coaching for his job and having to answer, "Are you going to be back?" And I thought that was a silly question at the time. And of course, like, the Raiders just being able to keep up with the Chiefs is something that rivalry really sparks. And even last season, not this season, of course, but the season previous, when we beat them on Christmas Day, which, by the way, when I listened to your guys' episode with Lincoln, he brought that up, that was a defensive thing, and it wasn't necessarily like, we were supposed to win that game. And maybe it's complacency on the Chiefs side. But again, the 2 different teams at the time is undisciplined team against a team that was ready to capitalize on an opportunity that fell to them. And can't fault the Chiefs for it, can only be mad at ourselves. But I'm fortunate to say, as Raider fans, anytime we go up against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Max Crosby is always ready to go. When we had Derek Carr, that was one of his favorite matchups. Even though he didn't always play his best, he still looked forward to that matchup. And even when we had John Gruden, I think one of the Monday Night Football games where we went against the Chiefs, this is before Henry Ruggs got into that DUI accident where he unfortunately killed somebody. He clearly looked like he was the best player on the field, where we could have kept up offensively with the Chiefs. And now we know how that story ended up, where, obviously his career isn't going to work out how we hoped for. But, the Raiders have always been a team that when the rivalry happens, we like to rise to the occasion, especially the Chiefs. And I think what NFL teams, when they play the Chiefs, is the Chiefs are always going to get that team's best because they want to be the team that said, we beat the best team in the world. We beat the best team in the world. So each week, the Chiefs are going against that respective team's absolute best, because every team that's competitive wants to beat the very best. And at the time, especially last season, the Chiefs were the Super Bowl champions. They were going to get everyone's godforsaken best. So
statistically, across the board, talking about that game last year, the only difference in that game is that one turnover. Stat for stat, the Raiders were better than the Chiefs. Aiden O'Connell outslung Patrick Mahomes. The running game was better. I mean, when the Raiders are on, they're on the full team. The full team goes together. That is one thing about the Raiders. They will win or lose as a team, and they are all on or they're all off. And I think you brought him up, Max Crosby. We talked about this the opposite way with Devontae Adams. Max Crosby is the ultimate locker room guy, it seems like. Mm-hmm. He's the guy that's in there picking everybody's heads up. Oh, we're this, we're four, and whatever. Who gives a rip, guys? Let's keep playing. We're here to play football. We get to play a game that we thought was just going to be for fun for our whole lives. Now we get to be that guy. George Kittle's another one of those guys, but we don't like the Niners. So, but Max Crosby is like a real vibe guy in the locker room, and he's there. He's a real Raider, like a rich.
He looks like one,
like a rich Gannon Raider, like a.
He's the epitome of a Raider. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I'm excited to see what Pete Carroll does in there with that defense. I think it's going to be a good season for the Raiders.
All right, so Cody, since you said the Raiders are going to make the playoffs, give us a floor and a ceiling record prediction for the Raiders.
So I think a reasonable floor for the Raiders it would be somewhere in the ballpark between 7-10 and 8-9. I think this football team at its base level could be that good of a team. And again, a lot of it is, to everyone's point here, with adding certain pieces, the draft. Again, Pete Carroll, I think, is going to make a huge difference in being obviously a coach that has a lot more pedigree, Super Bowl experience, and a guy that knows how to lead a team. And even when he was hired to be the Seattle Seahawks coach, and not to relive anything that you don't want to talk about, Will, as the Seahawks had Pete Carroll, that team just seemed better than originally assumed, and a lot of it was because the energy that Pete brought, that defense, and all the others. And I really feel like that Pete Carroll will bring that same energy, and it won't be a quick hot hire fix where it was a Josh McDaniels or an Antonio Pierce. This is a coach with real pedigree and a guy that knows how to build a culture. And I think just having that new perspective for the Raiders in the building and the new draft class that is being brought in, I think at bare minimum, the floor is like a 7-10, 8-9, and I'm actually really strong on that 8-9. Like, I really think that that's how the season will end. If it is a losing season, it's going to be around there, because the Raiders will be a hard out where any team that plays them, they're going to get their best, and it's going to be maybe a shootout. The days of like the Raiders getting blown out by 30, I don't know how many of those are going to happen this season, but I doubt very few from what happened last year.
What's your ceiling?
Well, ceiling would be a 10-7 record or 11-6. I think that's a little bit more overzealous. I would firmly say like a 10-7. Last year, that's what helped the Denver Broncos and the Steelers get into the playoffs. So I would say the Raiders at a 10-7 record could sneak into a wild card. Now, to your point, Joel, there's never been a divisional team or division that has gotten all four teams in the playoffs. So that means someone in our division is going to have to fall back. Some part of me thinks that might be a little bit of the Broncos, only because I don't know if they have enough offensively. But regardless, though, I don't want to get in the minutia of that, because that's another debate that could go on forever. I just ultimately think that the Raiders getting 10 wins could find the way to get into the wild card and at least have a shot. Will they go far? I don't know. But at least a 10-7 record, I think, is the ceiling and the way to get in the playoffs.
I think the Raiders have a pretty favorable schedule this year. You're on the road at Philadelphia in December, and that's not great. But besides that, you've got your home and homes with the AFC West. You go to Texas in December. You go to Denver, but that's a home and home, right? So most of your games are going to be pretty favorable. You go to New England in September, so that should be fine. I don't disagree with your ceiling section there. I think that's pretty accurate, honestly.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I know we said we don't put a whole lot of stock into the strength of schedule, but they're 16th in strength of schedule. So they also traveled the 18th least miles, if that matters at all to anybody. But Chargers travel the most. So I don't know if that makes any difference or not.
They need to keep traveling.
That way they can have an early trip to Cabo. They're used to flying, so it's fine.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. Is that a prediction, Will?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Cody, I want to ask you a little bit of a fantasy football question here.
Okay.
So, last year, rookie tight end Brock Bowers, he broke several records. He broke the record for most receptions by a rookie tight end. He broke the record for most receptions by a rookie. And he broke the record for most receiving yards by a rookie tight end. Mm-hmm. Given everything that the Raiders have done this offseason with Geno Smith and Ashton Jeanty, everything they've done, do you see Brock Bowers being better or worse statistically this year?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. I think statistically, like in terms of fantasy scoring, you're going to see more from Brock Bowers, excuse me. But it's not going to be in the sense of like more receptions. I see it more in like yards and more touchdowns because he only had 5 touchdowns all of last season. So I see him maybe being more of a focal point in the red zone, maybe, especially kind of like he's a very good route runner. And if anything, like I can see him getting in situations like ironically with how Travis Kelce is in the red zone where he's very elusive and he sits in a zone. So I can see Brock Bowers being along those lines. But again, with a lot of the additions and especially having Jeanty, Jack Besh, we still have Jacoby Myers. We have a better quarterback in Geno Smith, who's a lot more accurate than the previous quarterbacks that we've had. Like, I would say Brock Bowers is poised to have a better statistical in terms of yards and touchdowns. 112 receptions is very hard to duplicate at any position. So I would just taper expectations in that. And it's a tight end, so I don't want anyone to think that anything under 100 receptions is a failure. Like, that's unprecedented on a lot of levels. But I think Brock is going to be an offensive juggernaut because if the Raiders get their run game involved, which it's much improved, that play action is going to work, and it normally works in the tight end's benefit. And especially with a quarterback like Geno Smith, if he is having to go out on the run and have a security blanket like Brock Bowers, he's going to be a beneficiary to a lot of those throws down the field, in the zone, or in the red zone. I really feel like fantasy-wise is going to be someone that, just ups it a little bit, but it's going to come in like yards and touchdowns, not touchdown receptions or not receptions. Gosh, okay, let me slow down. Not in receptions, because that's just 112 is very hard to duplicate.
I got a question for you. This is a bit off, I don't know, not out of left field here, but so you guys, the Raiders have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 receivers right now that are new to the team, whether they're unrestricted free agents or that you picked them up from undesignated draft picks or whether you drafted them. 8 is quite a bit. You've only got 4 people that were on the team last year in your receiving core, with Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Shedrick Jackson, and Alex Bachman. Who of any of the current available free agent wide receivers do you think would be the best fit for your team and why?
Well, I think there's only one that I would love to have back on the team, and he's a former Raider in Amari Cooper.
Yep.
And maybe this is my fandom for Amari Cooper. I don't know why people just don't like Amari Cooper. If anything, he is the perfect receiver to have in your locker room. He's quiet. He doesn't demand the ball. He knows every single route, and he's just extremely smart in terms of football knowledge. When he was on the Raiders in his second and his third year, he was an over 1,000-yard receiver, and he was Derek Carr's like number 1 guy, scored a lot of touchdowns. In Dallas, he was nothing but productivity on the field, and I really feel like I don't know what happened in Buffalo to where he just wasn't seen as a guy to throw the ball to. Maybe it was offense, maybe it was just game plan or whatever the case may be, but I really feel like Amari Cooper is a receiver, regardless of the team that he can be on, would be extremely productive. And he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy, but just teams have to respect how good of a route runner he is, how good of a pass catcher he is. And if anything, like if we were to keep a select few receivers, I would love to have a guy like Amari Cooper back on the team because he is such a good team first guy. And I really think locker rooms need that. And again, I'm not asking for Amari Cooper to go 1,500 yards again, but could he in situations be like a rotational number 2 wide receiver when it comes to certain play calls? Yeah, I'd love that because he knows every route and he could get open. And even in I think one of the final years he was with Cleveland, he was still a 1,000-yard receiver in that offense with like 3 different quarterbacks. So Amari Cooper, in my opinion, is a guy that a lot of teams are just sleeping on. And I don't know, maybe he needs to be more like of a diva, but I just don't know why he just doesn't get a little respect, at least for what he can do on the field.
He's too vanilla, right? He's very, I'm going to be good quietly, silent assassin type. And so that truly is why you're right. He doesn't have the diva aspect. I actually, sitting right over here, have an Amari Cooper Dallas Cowboys jersey. I was certain they were keeping him, and man, did they did not. But I love Amari Cooper. I think he's great.
Yeah, same.
I think we need more receivers like Amari Cooper in the league, honestly. I'm tired of these guys that they do really well on their rookie contract and then they get paid and then they suck.
Well,
and then
Brandon Cooks is another player that, like, everywhere he goes, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. He doesn't do anything wrong, and yet he just seemed to be always a trade piece or signs a 1-year deal with somebody, but he always seems to be productive, but he's not loud, he's not boisterous. He's just a guy that does his job. And for some reason, the NFL, or at least NFL teams, they want a guy that's going to be defiant until it gets too much, and then they're going to then put a story out that this guy's a locker room problem, even though, like, he's not a locker room problem. He's just a guy that's confident. And, like, Amari Cooper and Brandon Cooks are almost similar in that respect of, like, they just do their jobs, and, you know, they don't need to be loud to be very productive. And for some reasons, teams, the louder you are, the more money teams will throw at you, but yet they're going to also complain about you the most about how loud you are. So it's very interesting how the NFL kind of operates in that manner.
Since we're on the topic of former Dallas Cowboys, let's talk a little bit about linebacker Jaylon Smith.
Okay.
So the Raiders signed him, and I just kind of want to get some of your thoughts. He didn't play in 2024. He last played with the Raiders, actually, in 2023, but I think he only played like 1 game, and he's only 29. Mm-hmm. In 5 seasons in Dallas, he had 516 total tackles in 68 games. But then in the 4 seasons he's played since then, he's played 20 total games. He's had 110 tackles. 88 came in one of those seasons where he played 13 games. And he played those 4 different seasons for 3 different teams. So kind of give us some of your thoughts on Jaylon Smith and why the Raiders signed him and kind of how he fits into your defense.
Well, I think the same reason why the Raiders signed, Devin White, who is a guy that is trying to prove himself if he can still play. He's also kind of a younger linebacker that had early success with the Buccaneers. But with Jaylon Smith, I mean, he was coached by Patrick Graham on 2 different occasions. Obviously, what you just said in 2023 with the Raiders, and then also a stint with the New York Giants when Jaylon Smith was there. But if I'm being honest, this isn't a guy that I think is going to be the anchor of the defense. It's probably just a guy to bring in to see, does he have anything left? And to be honest, like the one of the things, and I think it's a question that's going to come up pretty soon, one of the things about the Raiders that I really wish that they would have addressed more in the draft was their linebacking core. We have a very weak linebacking core, and at this point, we're just trying to bring guys in that we think would help us be competitive in that front, because that's honestly, like, outside of some other positions I could probably name, linebacker is probably the one where we are the most susceptible to defenses, that we really don't have a guy that is, Fred Warner type, or a guy that's like a Roquan Smith. Like, we really just need guys that can compete. Who's going to emerge? Do they have anything left in the tank? And again, like, if Jaylon Smith makes the locker room, I'm not to think that he's going to get 10 sacks in a season. He might be a guy that just might be able to bring in some of the young players and give confidence and be a locker room guy, because, again, with relationships with Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll. But that's all I see this as. I don't think he's going to do anything more than just be a guy competing. And if he makes it day 1 roster, I'll be really happy. But, we haven't even gone through a training camp yet, so we'll even see if he makes the 53-man roster.
Yeah, like Will with Amari Cooper, I unfortunately have a Jaylon Smith Cowboys jersey. He had a fantastic season. I forget which season it was, but he was great for 1 season. I got his jersey, and then he sucked after that.
I think it was 2019, 2018, I think. I don't remember. I think it was around there, because
I think it was his second year in the league.
Okay.
Whatever that was. It was his second year. He had a really great season, and then I got his jersey, and then right after that happened, he was just bad.
Yeah. It always happens.
Yeah.
A little bit different than Amari Cooper, but still.
Yeah,
it's sad that I have his jersey.
It's supposed to be a sign, a trade and signed, and they traded and never signed.
All right, so Cody, since you brought up one of the weaknesses for the Raiders, are there any other weaknesses that you see, and are there what are the strengths for this team?
So outside of the linebacker position being a weakness, I think our safety position is pretty weak as well. And this is where some of the things in the draft I liked. Like I like some of the interior linemen that we got. I like the offensive line that we drafted in the 4th round. But I really wish the Raiders would have prioritized getting a safety. I did write down 2 safeties for the show as players that I see still available. And one of them is Justin Simmons, former Denver Bronco, former Atlanta Falcon. I feel like he would at least be a guy that can get on the roster and at least be, somebody that could compete or at least be in the rotation. And then another guy is Marcus Williams from Baltimore. He's still out there in free agency. He would probably be an interesting player to add. And if anything, just to see if he can just be like a spot starter or a guy that can be in rotation, because our safety position, in my opinion, took a little bit of a step back when we did not re-sign Morrig and he left us for the Panthers. I feel like that's a pretty big hole. And as far as our cornerbacks, I feel like they're going to be okay, but we really needed safety help. And so, safety and linebacker, in my opinion, are the 2 positions. I feel like the Raiders are going to feel the most pain because those are our weakest positions, respectively.
What would you say is their biggest strength right now?
I think the biggest strength right now would probably be their offense have gotten a lot better, and I'll stick to their passing offense has increased a lot with just acquiring Geno Smith. Brock Bowers is where we were talking about them. Again, as what we've said throughout the show, is drafting Ashton Genty, the number 1 running back out of the draft class, and not Amari and Hampton. And then having a plethora of other weapons that Geno Smith could help and, find an open guy, and having Chip Kelly, a really focused offensive mind to really not only have a spread style offense, but really could help Geno thrive with quick decisions and how the game plan could go. So I think the offense, ironically enough, is kind of the strong suit to the Raiders. Their offensive line gives me a little worries, but I feel like there's enough parts around them to where they could put points up in bunches, which will help, because last season we just weren't a team that was going to be and air it out and have a high scoring game. But I feel like the Raiders this season could be a team that can keep up with some high powered offenses.
I would like to put an asterisk on that. I agree with everything you said. I actually think a bigger strength for them, and you touched on it multiple times, is specifically their coaching staff. I think they've hired a lot of really good pieces, and Pete Carroll has crafted his own team to be right there with him. I think this coaching staff, with the right execution from the players, right, because coaches don't play the game, they just kind of manage the game. With the right execution from the players, this coaching staff has the probability to take them far. Mm-hmm. They've got a genius offensive mind in what's his name, Chip Kelly. Pete Carroll brought a lot of people who he had with him in Seattle over. They've got a bunch of just wonderful offensive minds out there. And additionally, they have a bunch of deeply experienced defensive coaches in that team to keep them going and everything. The Raiders have drafted speed for a long time, and now it's time that somebody puts that speed into use.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question. As far as Pete Carroll goes, I kind of see him as like the Coach Calipari of football a little bit.
Yeah.
He's had a long past and some shaky instances, particularly maybe like USC. Considering he's the oldest coach in the NFL right now, and just he's his personality, like the legend of him, has kind of gone beyond him as maybe necessarily a coach. Mm-hmm. Do you have any, even if they're well hidden, reservations on him, or potentially just something where you could see like this might leave us high and dry?
Yeah, actually, so as a Raiders fan, of course, it seems like every offseason where we make a move, in our opinion, that's a splash, or we get a coach that we think is a good one. I won't point to Antonio Pierce. I won't point to Josh McDaniels. I'll revert to John Gruden when we hired him the second time. There was all this hype around it. And, the first couple of seasons, same John Gruden. And then all of a sudden, year 3, starting to take off, emails happen, and then come to find out it just didn't work. And very similar to what Pete Carroll is, not that he's going to have hidden emails, but in the same respect of we have a Pete Carroll guy that's a former Super Bowl champion, been to the Super Bowl and lost, has been able to go toe-to-toe with a Sean Payton in the NFC, has been able to go toe-to-toe with Jim Harbaugh when he was with the Niners, and a guy that we know can change a culture. But at the same time, what if that doesn't happen? What if we still see the same Raider products? If, I would be lying if I said that's not in the back of my mind to assume that the same old Raiders are going to be on the field, because maybe, you can do everything you can to dress up and put the lipstick and the dress on the pig, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig, and you're really not going to change it exactly what it is. I would be lying to you if I said that wasn't any concern of mine of like, what if all this high flying and college attitude that Pete Carroll's bringing is not going to do a damn thing, and what is that going to look like on the NFL field? So as much optimism as I'm feeling and as much like vibrato I'm trying to project as far as I want my Raiders to do well, I also do want to know, like in week 1 when we go to the New England and face the Patriots, where do we stand with the Patriots? You know, when we go head to head with the Chargers or the Chiefs, how good have we gotten, or are we worse, or where are we at? I'd be lying if I said I didn't have reservations as far as like, is Pete Carroll maybe too old for the game of football? You know, and I'll be honest, that's some reservations. But at the same time, to Will's credit about the coaches that he's brought in, the players that he's brought in, and again, just changing the mindset of how the organization has been might be just the world of difference. And I think that is the optimism I lean in. But, you know, to not think that there is going to be some catastrophic drop off for all this hype is definitely on the forefront for sure.
Well, the reason I bring it up is slightly projection. I'm a Carolina fan, and Bill Belichick's about to start his regime, and
his girlfriend's going to start her regime. Or is that what you're
and that's where I get to the reservations.
Uh-huh.
And so I just wonder, you know, like regardless of how much, you know, storied history he has. I mean, obviously Pete's not playing that game right now, but just as far as, you know, whether it's just, hey, I'm retiring, I'm out, or if it's just something like, hey, I don't know. I just with guys this big, it always gives me pause. It's the same thing in the NBA. I got to throw out the NBA or basketball every time. But when you put together a super team, it rarely turns out the way you think it will. And
100%.
so no one's saying that the Raiders, you know, that this is, you know, becomes a super team, but just the hype behind it. That's why I got to ask.
Yeah. And also there's a real, you know, apprehension about like these older coaches. Can they get through to the younger flock of players that just aren't coached the same way? Like we hear it all the time about some NFL coaches that like these guys just don't take, you know, advice or criticism the same way. Like they, you know, you have to deliver it in a certain way. That's why some coaches that are like Nick Sirianni or Cliff Kingsbury in the Commanders is working out so well, because he's speaking to younger guys in a certain way that's not like what maybe a Bill Parcells would do, where he's going to break you down but lift you up in a way. You just have to get through the breakdown, you know. And I'm not saying that Pete Carroll is anything like that guy, because he's more of a positive guy. But Bill Belichick, to kind of continue your point, is an older guy that he's going to be talking to a younger generation. Can he get through to them in the way that he does it without having guys walk out the door because they've never been talked to like that? Is he too old for the game? And I think there is some respect to like Pete Carroll in the same question. Has the game passed him up? Has he, you know, even though it's been a season, can he still duplicate what he did in Seattle at a high level, or has NFL just moved on? So,
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, with Bill Belichick, I see it as like, look, anyone that's at Carolina this next year is there for Bill.
Yeah.
Like they're at that point, I mean, dude, you've got the legend as your coach in college in the ACC.
yeah.
Also, I'm putting a prediction, Joel, write this down. I'm thinking Bill's girlfriend's going to end up sleeping with one of the players at some point.
See, I think
Before Bill leaves.
I think Bill and his girlfriend are going to break up before the end of the season.
Oh, I think they will, but I think that will be the reason. I think it'll be something. It'll be something wild like that.
All right.
That's going on the spreadsheet for sure.
24-year-old walking around college, absolutely.
All right, Cody. So I got one more question for you. We're going to kind of start closing out the show. We're running out of time, but I got one more question for you. And then before we end, I'm going to hand the floor over to Will to talk about something that we have to talk about because we're talking about the Raiders.
Actually, may I first, actually? It isn't the same thing. I'm so sorry. It isn't the same thing.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Bill Belichick, his girlfriend is 24 years old. And we've seen Bill change his dress and his pattern a little bit because he's now in college and he's got this young, arguably beautiful girlfriend. And Mark Davis, being 69 years old with his 26-year-old, again, arguably beautiful girlfriend, has not changed a damn thing. What's up with that haircut? Cody, the floor is yours.
You know what? I was actually waiting for you guys to ask me this question, because if I'm being honest, I have no idea. I don't know why he keeps that haircut. It's not for luck, that's for sure. It's not my favorite haircut. And actually, my buddy Drew, who I do the show with, I was joking with him that maybe for Halloween I should be Mark Davis for Halloween and have the hair and all that, because it is such a costume that maybe I'll have to do it. So it's funny that you bring that up.
Please do it.
But I have no idea why. I hate the haircut. But also at the same time, it's kind of like his moniker. Like, if he lost the hair, how could anyone recognize him in the streets? I don't know.
Well, maybe that's what you should go for then.
He should trademark it. He'd make a lot of money off that hair.
Hey, if you decide to actually do that, please let me know, because you're going to come on our Halloween episode.
That'd be sick. All right, I'll let you guys know. I guess I'd have to shave this because you don't really have a beard, huh?
No.
Oh, it would be a massive, drastic change just for the bit.
Certainly, the closest one
I don't
to
know.
him
My
right
wife
now.
might divorce me if she saw me like that. So I don't know. I'll let you know.
The closest one to him is Avery with the hair color. So I feel like
I could do it if I cared more about, if it was my bit that I was doing, I'd consider it.
I could probably do Al Davis better than Mark Davis, but who knows? I got to find a slick white Raider jacket, get it in all white. Got to look like I just rolled out of the 1970s with how Mark Davis dresses sometimes. So we'll see.
Dude, I could probably do Brock Bowers, honestly. At this point.
all right, Joe.
We're both losing some hair.
Sorry to derail us, but
No,
he was very
you're good.
fitting.
That was the next thing I wanted to get to anyway.
I know what you're.
We just knocked it out of the way. All right, so we'll end with this question, Cody. So you didn't bring this up as one of the weaknesses for the Raiders, but a lot of people, I feel like, see this as a weakness, is their pass rush. And the reason for that is because I know Max Crosby was hurt. He only played 12 games. He had 7.5 sacks. But last year, the Raiders, as a defense, had 38 sacks, which ranked in the bottom half of the league. So with everything the Raiders have done this offseason, do you feel like that they have done enough to have a good pass rush this year?
I think that they have done enough to where it's going to improve. Now, in terms of is it going to be bottom of the pack defense in the bottom 10? I don't think so. I think the Raiders defense, when it's healthy, I think it can be jockeying for about ranked 15th, maybe even getting close to the top 10, because even in 2023, when we had a healthy-ish defense, we were pretty much ranked 9th, I think, overall. We slipped a little bit in 15th. Obviously, we didn't get to the quarterback as much as you pointed out, Max Crosby, but also we didn't have Malcolm Kuntz for all of last season, who accounted for 8 sacks in 2023. That's a lot of production we missed. Also, Tyree Wilson has kind of been like a hit and miss on our first-round pick. He was coming back from an injury in 2023. He looked a little bit better, but had the same production. So this is going to be a prove-it year for him, whether or not he's going to get an extension or maybe going to get paid by another team. So I imagine he's going to want to do really well. And we didn't have Christian Wilkes for a large portion of the season. He was only available for 5 games, and he had 2 sacks by himself within the 5 games. And you can tell within the first game, he was a real menace in the middle and really clogging up the lanes when it came to the run game and getting after the quarterback. So having a full season with him healthy next to Adam Butler, that's going to be a lot different. So I think that when the Raiders are healthy, having Malcolm Kuntz, Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, of course, not including the other guys that they've drafted in this upcoming draft class, Christian Wilkins, I think the Raiders' pass defense is going to be a lot better than people realize. And I'm not saying that they're going to be top 10, but I think that they would be on the outside, like maybe top 12 kind of a defense, to where that pressure defense is really going to change a lot of game plans for some teams. And even like in the divisional games when the Raiders seem to play, some really good football, I really feel like that defense is going to answer the bell. And especially Max Crosby playing with a rejuvenated feeling with being with Patrick Graham again and also Pete Carroll. I feel like maybe we're going to see a comeback player of the game type of season with Max Crosby, in my opinion. So I think the Raiders defense will do much better in 2025.
Yeah, for what it's worth, take this for what you will, but the Raiders had a pass rush win rate of 43% last year, which was 10th in the league. So that's pretty good. And I think if those injuries didn't happen, I think that would have been higher, as well as their sack total. So
right.
I really like what you said. I think their pass rush is going to be better, just depending on how healthy their defensive line is.
Right. Agreed.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Again, we want to thank Cody for coming on with us. I don't remember if we did this at the beginning or not, but Cody, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Sure. So it's just at Drew Code Sports Talk. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, pretty much wherever there's social media, Drew Code is at. And then you can also find us on YouTube, just Drew Code Sports Talk. You can put that in YouTube and subscribe to the channel as well.
All right. Well, thanks again, Cody, for coming on. That's all we have for today. Stay tuned for more NFL talk next week. And as always, don't forget to keep your balls played with. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it, fellas.